So, think about this for a second. What if the guy screaming at you in traffic or, pounding his fist on the boardroom table and just completely dominating his household?
Yeah.
What if he isn't displaying toxic masculinity at all?
Right.
Like, what if what you're actually looking at is just the terrified, fragile psychology of a little boy who just happens to be wearing a man's suit?
Yeah, it completely upends everything we think we know about gender and power and society. I mean, we've been misdiagnosing the disease for decades, honestly.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are taking an absolute sledgehammer to the conventional understanding of the male psyche.
We really are.
We are exploring the hidden architecture of the Western man. And to do that, we're actually using a really incredibly specific, hyper-focused case study. We are looking at the Finnish man.
Which is such a fascinating choice.
Right, because why the Finnish man? Well, he represents this perfect psychological bridge. On one side of his DNA, you have this genetic and cultural memory of a completely free democratic tribal past, deeply connected to nature. And then on the other side, you have the domesticated, anxious reality of a man living under a conqueror's laws, ancient religious cages, and just the endless, exhausting treadmill of modern materialism.
It's an incredibly brilliant vantage point. And our analysis today is guided by materials curated by Petri Hakkarainen. We're synthesizing his lectures along with the profound psychological frameworks of Carl Jung and Robert Moore, and some truly deep mythological analysis, too.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff.
It is. It's really about looking at how historical trauma and societal structures don't just change a culture, but they literally rewire the human mind.
Exactly. Now, before we jump into the deep end here, just a quick note for you listening. To truly understand this psychological rewiring, we have to look at extreme examples. We are going to touch on some pretty intense, politically charged topics today.
Right, things like nationalism, skinhead culture, and highly sensitive historical dynamics.
Yeah, and we want to be incredibly clear right up front. We are here to impartially unpack the theories presented in these psychological frameworks. We aren't endorsing any political viewpoints, left or right. We are simply using these cultural phenomena as diagnostic tools to decode the underlying psychology of the modern man.
We're looking at the symptoms to find the root cause.
Okay, so let's get into it.
Let's start by looking at the surface level. If you observe the modern Western man, and we'll use the Finnish man as our archetype today, everything appears perfectly fine. I mean, the system seems to be working.
Right on paper, he is the picture of stability. He's got a job, he pays his taxes, he mows the lawn.
Exactly. He earns a decent living. He hits the gym. He puts in the hours at the office. In the Finnish context, he might go to his summer cottage, chop some wood, heat up the sauna.
Yeah, nice, quiet life.
Right. And to the outside observer, the psychological X-ray looks completely clean. He's productive, he's quiet, and he's just generally okay.
But if you peel back that very thin, very polite layer of societal wallpaper, you find a structure that is entirely hollowed out. There is this profound, deafening inner crisis happening right beneath the surface.
It's a crisis of expression, fundamentally.
Yeah.
When you look at the psychological data and cultural observations, there is a massive impenetrable block when these men attempt to share the deeper spiritual or emotional aspects of their lives.
Right.
And it's crucial to understand here, it is not that they don't possess these depths. It's not that they're unfeeling robots. It's that the bridge required to communicate those depths to another human being has been completely destroyed.
Yeah, there's an anecdote from Hakkarainen's synthesis that paints such a vivid picture of this. Imagine two couples going for a walk together in the forest, and for the entire duration of this hour-long walk, the women are chatting.
Just constantly talking.
Yeah, exchanging ideas, analyzing relationships, connecting emotionally, processing their weeks. And the men. Complete unbroken silence, not a single word exchanged between them.
We have to be a little nuanced here.
Yeah.
Because men certainly can bond in silence.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
There is a deeply ingrained camaraderie in shared quiet, in simply existing alongside another man while doing a task. But that's where the trap really lies.
How so?
Well, when that silence ceases to be a choice and becomes the only available mode of existence, when a man is literally incapable of discussing anything beyond his job or the upcoming election or the weekend sports scores, that peaceful silence suddenly becomes a solitary confinement cell.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here for a second, because I can hear some guys listening to this and rolling their eyes.
Oh, absolutely.
They might say, look, silence is just a guy thing. My grandfather never talked about his feelings. He just worked at the factory and provided for us, and he was a great man. Why are we pathologizing guys just wanting some peace and quiet?
It's a really fair question. but it misses the internal reality of that silence.
Yeah.
We aren't talking about a Zen monk choosing stillness. We're talking about a psychological landscape that psychologists refer to as terra incognita.
The unknown land.
Exactly the unknown land. When a man cannot articulate his inner life, when he lacks the vocabulary to say, I am terrified, I'm failing as a father, or I feel completely empty despite my promotion.
Wow, yeah.
He doesn't just keep it hidden from others, he becomes estranged from himself. The silence isn't peaceful. It's deadening. It's an absolute inability to navigate his own internal geography.
And the real-world consequences of living in that unknown land are devastating. We aren't just talking about men being a bit grumpy or emotionally distant at dinner.
No, the fallout is lethal. When you look at the statistics in these highly domesticated modern cultures, you see staggeringly high male suicide rates. You see pervasive deep-seated depression that goes entirely undiagnosed because the men simply won't seek help.
Because asking for help requires words they don't have.
Exactly. And you see extreme isolation, particularly tragic in divorced men. When a marriage ends, many of these men lose their single, solitary emotional tether to the world, and they completely collapse inward.
Which leads us to the ultimate coping mechanism, king alcohol.
Yes. Alcohol becomes the only socially sanctioned skeleton key to unlock that suppressed emotional vault.
Right.
In cultures with this specific psychological caging, alcohol isn't just a beverage, it's a critical release valve. It's the only permission slip a man has to cry, to express rage, or to tell another man he loves him.
It's heartbreaking when you really think about it. The frameworks we're exploring make a bold, almost controversial claim here. They argue that the modern domesticated man literally cannot help himself right now.
Yeah.
And temporarily, at least, women cannot help him either. It's not a matter of a wife just asking her husband to open up more. It's a fundamental, structural inability to express the emotional self.
It really is.
It's like these men are operating high-end, powerful computers, but the entire software package for emotional expression has been completely uninstalled. And instead of tech support, they just have a 12-pack of beer.
That's a perfect analogy. The hardware is totally there, but the operating system for emotional fluency is missing.
So the obvious question for us is why? How did the software get deleted? To understand this, we can't just look at modern society. We have to travel back in time.
We do.
We have to look at what Hakkarainen identifies as the fall from the tribe.
Right, because if we want to understand the cage, we have to look at what the wild looked like. The original animistic cultures of the northern regions, the Finno-Ugric peoples, the Sami and similarly structured Native American tribal cultures, they operated on a psychological and societal blueprint that is entirely alien to us today.
They were fundamentally free, right?
Free, yes. But more importantly, their societal geometry was completely different. Modern society is a ladder. You were always climbing, trying to get above the person below you.
Constant competition.
Exactly. But tribal animistic society was a circle. You didn't climb, you belonged. Every single individual had a sacred, designated place within that circle. There were no disposable people. The concept of someone being useless to the economy just didn't exist. Even the person we might cruelly call the village fool today was tolerated, integrated, and seen as having a specific spiritual role to play in the community's fabric.
And what about the dynamic between men and women? Because the modern assumption is always that the past was just this brutal, oppressive patriarchy.
That is a massive misconception when it comes to these specific animistic tribes. Women held exceptionally high equal status. They weren't property at all.
Really?
Oh yeah, they owned land. They had the final say on their own marriages. And in many of these ancient cultures, they were fierce warriors who fought right alongside men when the tribe was threatened.
Okay, so what about the men? How did they derive their value, if not from a paycheck or climbing that ladder?
Men had intrinsic value. Their worth was not tied to how much capital they produced or how high they climbed on a corporate ladder. A man was respected simply for being a man and for his inner spiritual connection to what these cultures called the Great Spirit.
So his value was just rooted in his existence.
Exactly, his connection to nature and his role in the tribe. He had a voice, he had honor, and he had a direct line to the divine.
So we have this balanced, circular, expressive society where men and women are equals and everyone has a sacred purpose. What broke the circle?
Conquest. In the specific case study of the Finnish Man, it was the Swedish conquest of Finland. But this is a psychological pattern you see globally when an indigenous culture is overrun.
Right. It's not unique to them.
Not at all. The conquerors don't just arrive and take the physical land. They systematically dismantle the psychological architecture of the people. They impose a new hierarchy, a new ladder. And the most devastating weapon they use is language.
They subjugated the host language. I want to linger on this because I think modern listeners might underestimate how traumatizing this is. We think of language as a tool for communication, like
Right.
swapping out a wrench for a hammer. But it's so much deeper than that, isn't it?
Well, language is the operating system of the soul.
Hmm.
It is how you conceptualize reality itself. When the conquerors arrived, the Finnish man suddenly realized a terrifying new truth.
Which was,
To achieve any power, to have any credibility to defend himself in a court of law, or even to express a truth that the new ruling class would listen to, he could no longer use his native tongue.
wow.
His native language was officially classified as the language of peasants, of the uncivilized, of the primitive.
I want you, the listener, to really imagine this. Imagine having a profound thought, a deep feeling of injustice, or a brilliant idea. But the very words that naturally form in your brain are viewed by everyone in power as the babbling of a lower-class idiot.
It's horrific.
If your language is deemed primitive, your entire internal world is essentially made illegal. You can't speak your deepest truths because the vehicle you use to deliver them has been outlawed.
It was a crushing generational psychological blow. The Finnish man lost his status overnight. He lost his pride. And in a deeply primal, humiliating sense, he often had to watch the women of his culture favor the conquerors,
Ouch.
the men who now held all the power, the resources, and the civilized status. He was reduced to a second-class citizen in his own home, unable to even articulate his grief in a way the New World respected.
And they didn't just conquer the government and the language, they conquered the heavens, too.
The religious cage, yes. This is the second pillar of the psychological subjugation. The introduction of Christianity by the conquerors wasn't a peaceful theological debate.
No.
It was brutally severe. Historical analysis suggests it was enforced with a violence and strictness that was deeply traumatizing to an animistic people.
They didn't just change the name of the god you prayed to, they fundamentally changed the mechanics of how a human being is allowed to interact with the universe.
Exactly. The new religious authorities systematically banned all traditional modes of spiritual expression. Dancing, singing traditional runic chanting.
Stuff they'd done for centuries.
Right. These weren't just hobbies. These were the technologies the tribe used to process emotion and connect with the sacred. Overnight, they were outlawed as pagan sins.
I read that in the tribal past, the sacred was almost open source. Anyone could go into the forest, have a vision, and connect directly with the Great Spirit.
Yes, perfectly said, open source. But under the new religious regime, the sacred became centralized and monopolized. It was locked away behind the altar, firmly in the hands of Latin-speaking priests.
So you need permission now.
You need a middleman. The common man was stripped of his direct personal connection to the divine. If he wanted to speak to God, he had to go through an intermediary who spoke a language he didn't understand, representing a power structure that had conquered him.
So let's look at the compounding effect of this. You have a man who has lost his physical freedom, lost his societal status, lost his native language, lost his traditional songs, and lost his direct line to the universe.
Yeah.
He is entirely, completely caged.
This specific historical trauma creates what psychological frameworks call the Batcave man. It is the precise anatomy of psychological submission, and it plays out in 3 distinct stages.
Break down those stages for us. How does a free tribal mind get crushed into a Batcave man?
First, you are forced to submit to another man's will. This is the loss of physical freedom and sovereignty. You are no longer the master of your own time or labor.
Okay, step 1.
Second, you are forced to accept that another language is higher or more sophisticated than your own. This is the loss of your authentic voice. You internalize the idea that your natural thoughts are inferior.
It's devastating.
And third, and most deeply, you are forced to accept a completely foreign conceptual and religious system just to be considered a valid human being. You have to pretend to believe in a worldview that fundamentally alienates you from your own nature.
When you put a human being through that 3-step meat grinder, the result is not a happy, productive, well-adjusted citizen.
Far from it. The result is a man who becomes incredibly stubborn, perpetually anxious, and who harbors a deep, boiling subconscious resentment toward all forms of authority.
Wow.
The authentic self, the vibrant, expressive tribal man, he doesn't die. He is just driven underground. He retreats into the subconscious. He goes into the Batcave.
And that suppressed energy, that caged warrior spirit, it doesn't just evaporate because a priest or a king tells it to.
Sure.
Energy has to go somewhere. It mutates. And this brings us to some of the most challenging and intense analysis in our source material. We have to look at how this deeply repressed, caged warrior energy manifests in the modern world when it goes toxic.
This is where the psychological analysis looks at extreme modern phenomena, specifically the rise of skinhead culture and neo-Nazi ideologies in these populations.
Right, and as we said at the top, we are looking at this purely through a psychological lens.
Yes, these extremist groups do not simply spawn out of a vacuum. They are a symptom of a profound underlying societal disease. The frameworks argue that these toxic movements draw their twisted power directly from a massive societal disrespect for the ordinary working man.
When a society systematically strips away any healthy concept of male honor, when it mocks traditional masculinity, when it tells a man he has no intrinsic value unless he is wealthy or highly educated, that raw masculine energy doesn't just peacefully disappear.
No, it goes feral.
Feral, that's a good word for it.
It mutates into rebellion, but a deeply toxic, unguided rebellion. Because healthy concepts of true warrior energy, which involves protecting the vulnerable and serving a higher purpose, those have been repressed. So the energy finds the darkest, most destructive outlet available. It becomes about sheer dominance and hate.
And the tragedy of how symbols are co-opted plays right into this.
It's fascinating and devastating when you look at the historical trajectory of certain symbols. Take the swastika.
Right.
In its original ancient context found across countless global indigenous cultures, it was a profoundly sacred universal symbol. It represented the unity of male and female, the cycle of the sun, the unity of all living things. But because the healthy expression of the masculine was demonized and forced underground, that twisted, suppressed rage reached out and co-opted one of humanity's most sacred symbols, corrupting it into a horrifying emblem of hate and division. It is the ultimate psychological tragedy. You know, the shadow consuming the light.
But it's crucial to point out that for the vast majority of these conquered men, the reaction isn't to shave their heads and join a radical fringe group.
No, of course not.
For the average guy, the reaction is a deep, paralyzing apathy.
Yes, the apathy of the conquered. The analysis makes a stark, revealing comparison here. It asks us to look at men and cultures with a different historical psychological makeup, like France or Italy.
Okay.
Despite their own complex histories, these cultures still retain a certain baseline of fiery cultural self-esteem. When a French man faces a societal injustice, say the government announces they are cutting pensions or raising the retirement age, what happens?
They shut the entire country down. I mean, they take to the barricades, they set tires on fire, they yell, they express the anger outwardly.
Exactly. They still possess the psychological sovereignty to say, no, this is unacceptable and I will be heard. But the modern domesticated man, carrying centuries of inherited psychological subjugation, reacts entirely differently. When faced with the exact same injustice, he swallows the anger. He goes home, he stews on the couch, he changes the television channel, and he opens another beer.
He just takes it.
He has internalized the defeat so completely that resistance feels futile.
I want you listening right now to really sit with this idea. Think about your own life. When your boss emails you at 9 p.m. on a Friday with an unreasonable demand, or when you see a policy enacted that actively harms your community and you feel that hot flash of injustice,
Yeah.
but then you just swallow it. You draft a polite reply, you keep your head down, you don't push back. Our sources are suggesting that this isn't just you being a pragmatic, polite professional. That knot of submission in your stomach might be the echo of the conquered bat caveman living inside your nervous system.
That's a powerful way to put it.
You are acting out a script of submission that was written by foreign kings centuries before you were born.
It's a chilling thought, really. And what makes it so insidious is that this submission has seamlessly transitioned into the modern era. The cages are no longer made of iron or foreign kings or Latin-speaking priests.
They evolved.
The system evolved. Today, the cages are made of pure materialism.
We've moved from the spiritual cage to the economic cage. Hakkarainen uses a phrase to describe this modern state that is incredibly evocative, the miniature poodle existence.
In the modern materialistic trap, the entire complexity of the human soul has been reduced to a single brutal equation. The value of a man equals money.
Wow.
The analysis dares to use a highly provocative, historically loaded phrase, Arbeit macht frei, work, sets you free to describe the slave-like reality of the modern man.
Because his sole society-approved reason for existing is his ability to produce capital.
Precisely. If you aren't making money, if you aren't a productive cog in the economic machine, society loudly dictates that you have zero intrinsic value.
You're just a drain.
You're a failure. You become a jumping puppet for the economy, dancing whenever the market demands it.
This goes back to the contrast with the tribal man. The tribal man had value just for breathing, for being part of the circle. The modern man has to rent his right to exist every 2 weeks with a paycheck.
That is the core of modern materialism. The human being is reduced to a biological tool for material production. And the great lie of this cage is that we are told accumulating this material, buying the bigger TV, the nicer car, the better lawnmower will fulfill us.
But it doesn't.
No, it leaves the male psyche completely hollowed out.
So how does a hollowed-out psyche cope with that emptiness? If a man's deep, primal need for purpose, danger, and connection isn't being met by his spreadsheet job, what does he do?
He engages in psychological sublimation. He outsources his masculinity. The analysis gives a perfect quintessential modern example here. Formula One racing and drinking beer.
Okay, wait, stop right there. I love watching racing. How is watching cars drive in circles a sign of my hollowed-out psyche? Break down the mechanics of the sublimation for me.
Let's look at what's actually happening underneath. The modern man has been stripped of his sacred purpose, his connection to the Great Spirit, his physical vitality, and his vital role in the tribe.
Sure.
But the biological and psychological need for those things hasn't gone anywhere. He still craves speed, danger, technical mastery, and the thrill of the hunt.
So it's like putting a wolf in a tiny apartment, but putting a VR headset on it that plays a video of a forest.
That is exactly what it is. He sits safely on his soft couch in front of a glowing screen, watching fast, rapidly changing images. The Formula One drivers become his avatars.
They're doing the dangerous stuff for him.
They are wealthy. They are risking their lives. They are mastering powerful machines. He watches this intense manifestation of power while drinking alcohol to numb his underlying gnawing anxiety that he's doing nothing with his own life.
Wow, that hits hard.
This combination gives him a safe, contained, artificial illusion that he is participating in something grand and masculine. But in reality, it's what the frameworks call the miniature poodle-like existence. He is a domesticated pet, watching shadows on a cave wall, safely neutered of any real threat to the system that cages him.
Wow. A domesticated pet. That is a brutal mirror to hold up. But it gets even more intimate than that. This emasculation isn't just happening on a grand macroeconomic scale or in front of the TV. It's happening right at the dinner table. It's happening in modern relationships.
The sources are highly critical of the modern relationship dynamic, pointing out that modern media, particularly women's magazines and lifestyle media, have artificially defined what an acceptable man should be.
Right, they wrote the script.
The script dictates that he should be endlessly soft, hyper-understanding, and entirely domesticated. He should be harmless.
And if a man deviates from that script, if he shows edges or stubbornness or a desire for sovereignty...
The analysis observes a very painful dynamic where women who are themselves often unconsciously reacting to these cultural scripts use subtle emotional manipulation to control men who don't perfectly fit the mold.
Because direct conflict is messy.
Because direct conflict is often avoided in these domesticated cultures, the control happens through sulking, withholding affection, passive aggression, or subtle belittling.
There was one specific example from the source material that really jumped out at me. The phenomenon of women answering for their husbands in public.
Yes, this is highlighted as a severe, everyday form of denying a man his voice. Picture a couple at a restaurant or a dinner party. A question is directed at the man. Maybe the waiter asks what he wants to drink, or a friend asks his opinion on a movie.
Yeah.
Before the man can even open his mouth, the woman immediately jumps in and answers for him.
Okay, let me push back again here. Aren't we over-pathologizing a simple dinner party dynamic? Like maybe the guy just genuinely doesn't care what he orders. His wife knows he likes the IPA, so she just orders it to save time. Is that really psychological warfare?
Context matters, of course, but when it becomes a consistent pattern, it is absolutely a form of public infantilization. It communicates to everyone in the room, and most importantly to the man's own subconscious, that he is not a sovereign individual capable of speaking his own truth or making his own choices. It treats him like a child who needs a chaperone.
Oh.
In the grand scope of our deep dive today, it is the ultimate tragic echo of losing his native language to the conquerors. Only now the subjugation isn't happening by a Swedish king on a battlefield. It's being reenacted over appetizers on a Friday night.
So let's take a breath and look at where this leaves us. We've gone from free, deeply respected tribal hunters who had a voice in the circle and a connection to the divine. well, sorry, to guys whose highest societal function is buying junk on Amazon to keep the house quiet, sublimating our desire for adventure by watching cars go fast on TV while having our sentences finished for us at dinner parties.
It's quite the fall.
It is an incredibly bleak diagnosis. Is it terminal?
It is harsh, but it is not terminal. And this is where the materials pivot from diagnosing the disease to prescribing the cure. To truly heal this, we have to understand the deeper psychological architecture. We have to look at the developmental stages of a man. This is where we bring in the revolutionary framework of the Jungian psychologist Robert L. Moore.
This paradigm shift absolutely blew my mind. The central thesis is that what society constantly complains about and labels as the patriarchy is actually just boy psychology.
It completely flips the cultural narrative upside down. Society generally conflates patriarchy, which is characterized by dominance, violence, the suppression of emotion, rigid hierarchies, and the oppression of women with mature masculinity.
Right, we say, look at these men acting terribly, masculinity is toxic.
Moore says, stop right there. That behavior is not mature manhood. That is the psychology of an uninitiated, insecure little boy.
Because we lost the tribe, we lost the mechanism that turns boys into men. We lost the initiation.
Precisely. In the tribal societies we discussed earlier, there were intense community-led rites of passage. These weren't just parties, they were profound psychological intervention.
They were serious.
Very serious. Older, mature men would physically and emotionally separate the boys from their mothers. They would guide them through a terrifying ordeal, resulting in the psychological death of their boyish, egocentric worldview and a rebirth into mature, responsible manhood.
But the West entirely lost these rituals. We replaced rites of passage with getting a driver's license or buying your first beer.
And the result is catastrophic. You have millions of boys who grow physically into adult men. They get the deep voice, the beard, the mortgage. But psychologically, internally, they remain fragmented. Insecure, terrified little boys.
But they are boys wielding adult weapons. I mean, they are running multinational corporations. They're commanding military drones. They are leading global religions.
And that is terrifying. An uninitiated boy in a position of immense adult power is incredibly dangerous. Why? Because he is driven by primal fear, a desperate need for external validation, and a complete lack of an inner emotional center.
So he uses his power to build a fortress.
He uses his power to build a fortress around his own fragility.
Moore outlines 4 specific curses that this boy psychology, this patriarchy, inflicts not just on women or society, but on the men themselves. Let's walk through them because this explains so much of modern male misery. Curse number 1, emotional poverty.
From a very young age, boys in our culture are taught to control their physical environment and to control their reactions. But they are absolutely not taught how to feel, how to process complex emotions, or how to grieve.
Their emotional bandwidth is severely restricted.
They are essentially allowed 2 settings, anger or apathy.
Curse number 2, loneliness.
In boy psychology, asking for help is a fatal admission of weakness. It is deeply shameful. A real man is supposed to figure it out himself.
So he isolates himself.
So you have a situation where a man can be surrounded by a loving family, work in a bustling office, be part of the community, and yet remain profoundly psychologically isolated. He is terrified to show his soft underbelly to anyone, so he lives on an island of his own making.
Curse number 3, constant competition.
Because the uninitiated boy is fundamentally insecure. He views every other man in the world as a direct threat to his precarious status. There is no true brotherhood in boy psychology, only hierarchy.
The ladder again.
You are either above me on the ladder, which makes you a threat I need to take down, or you are below me, which makes you either useful for my ego or completely irrelevant. It is a constant, exhausting, lifelong battle for dominance.
And finally, curse number 4, a distorted view of the feminine.
The uninitiated man simply cannot relate to a woman as an equal sovereign human subject. He lacks the internal maturity, so he defaults to 3 modes.
Which are?
He either idealizes her as a flawless goddess who will save him, he fears her as a consuming monster who will trap him, or he tries to own and control her like a piece of property.
Why does he need to control her so badly?
Because the boy man lacks his own internal emotional center. He hasn't done the inner work, so he unconsciously relies entirely on the woman to be his emotional regulator.
She does the feeling for him.
She becomes his proxy for feeling. If she shifts, if she changes her mind, or if she leaves, his entire internal universe collapses. Hence, the desperate, sometimes violent need to control her movements and thoughts.
To really grasp how this plays out in the real world, we need to look at the archetypes. Moore breaks down the immature archetypes, the boy, and how they manifest in adult men as these dark, dysfunctional, shadowed figures.
Let's start with the first boy archetype, the divine child. In a healthy developing psyche, this energy represents new beginnings, a sense of wonder, and the vital spark of life.
Okay, but when it goes wrong?
When a man fails to mature and gets stuck in this energy, it splits into two shadows, the tyrant or the weakling.
The high chair tyrant. I think we all know a few of these.
We certainly do. The high-chair tyrant is the adult man who demands that the entire world revolve around his needs and moods. He throws literal or emotional tantrums when he doesn't get his way. He demands absolute perfection from everyone around him, his employees, his wife, his children, but he offers nothing in return. Think of the extreme grandiosity we see in certain toxic CEOs or political leaders.
So when a CEO screams at an intern because his coffee is wrong, that's not him being a powerful alpha male.
Exactly. It's not strength. It's a toddler demanding a bottle. And its flip side is the weakling. This is the man who refuses to take any responsibility for his life. He plays the eternal victim to get attention and care from others, refusing to stand on his own 2 feet.
Then there's the hero archetype.
The hero is actually meant to be a temporary transitional phase for a teenager. It's the energy needed to push away from the mother, to establish boundaries, and to test one's limits.
But you shouldn't stay there.
If a man gets stuck in the hero phase into his 30s, 40s, and beyond, he becomes the grandstander or the bully.
What does that look like in daily life?
The grandstander always needs a dragon to fight. He needs an enemy to crush just to prove to himself that he exists. He takes absurd, unnecessary risks.
So it's like the middle manager at a logistics company who treats a Tuesday morning staff meeting like he's storming Omaha Beach.
Yes, perfectly said.
He alienates all his coworkers because he always needs to be at war to feel important.
That is a brilliant analogy.
Yeah.
Yes. It's the guy who thinks life is an action movie, and he's Tom Cruise in Top Gun. It looks thrilling on a cinema screen, but it is disastrous if that's the energy you use to run a family or a country.
And the bully.
The bully shadow of this archetype needs to actively make others small so he can feel big.
What about the precocious child?
In childhood, this is the curious learning child who asks a million questions. Uninitiated in adulthood, it becomes the know-it-all trickster or the manipulator.
Ah, the guys who love playing devil's advocate.
This is the guy who uses his intellect and vocabulary not to help or build, but to deceive. He spins facts. He plays devil's advocate just to exhaust people. He always has to be the smartest guy in the room, and he loves making others feel stupid. He sells ideas, but has no core values to stand by.
And the final boy archetype, the Oedipal child.
The child who is deeply symbiotically connected to the mother. When stuck in this shadow as an adult, it becomes the mama's boy or the dreamer.
What does that look like?
He is completely dependent, seeking constant comfort and warmth. He often jumps obsessively from relationship to relationship, looking for a woman to act as a mother substitute to soothe him.
And the dreamer.
Or he falls into the dreamer's shadow, disconnecting from reality entirely. He lives in fantasy, playing video games or smoking weed all day, full of grand ideas, but completely unable to ground his desires in the real, difficult world.
I really want you to think about this. The most outwardly macho guy, the one dominating the boardroom, cutting people off in traffic, constantly picking fights at the bar or negging women. According to Moore's framework, he is not an alpha male.
No, not at all.
He is a terrified little boy wearing a man's suit. He's a high-chair tyrant or a grandstander bully. True power, mature power doesn't need to scream. It doesn't need to dominate.
Which brings us to the most urgent question of this entire deep dive. How do we fix it? If society won't initiate us, if there are no tribal elders waiting in the woods to guide us, how does a man initiate himself? How do we move from boy psychology to man psychology?
To answer that, the frameworks take a fascinating, almost mystical turn. We have to look at the sacred drama and how we navigate the inner psyche.
It relies heavily on the work of the historian of religion, Mircea Eliade. Eliade proposed that the modern man lives his entire life in what he called profane time.
Define profane time for us.
Profane time is linear, it is fragmented, and it is fundamentally meaningless. It is the 9-to-5 grind. It is paying bills, sitting in traffic, swiping on your phone. One day follows the next, and a march toward death with no overarching narrative. You are just a biological cog in the economic machine.
It's the miniature poodle existence.
Exactly. To heal, to be psychologically initiated, a man must figure out how to access sacred time.
And what is sacred time?
Sacred time is completely different. It is timeless. It is ordered. It is the space where you find the center, the axis of meaning in the universe. In ancient tribal times, the community rituals, the chanting, the myths, these were the technologies that transported the tribe out of profane time and into sacred time.
But we banned the chanting. We killed the rituals. So where do we find sacred time today?
The analysis argues that storytelling, specifically drama, movies, literature, theater, is our modern secular ritual.
The screenwriter is the modern shaman.
Precisely. The writer, the creator, acts as the magician archetype. They venture into the dark subconscious, into sacred time. They retrieve, meaning they structure it into a narrative, and they bring it back to the audience to help guide them through the trauma of separation and back towards psychological unity.
And what is the specific story we are trying to tell ourselves? What is the journey the psyche has to take to grow up?
It is the journey of psychological integration, relying heavily on the concepts of Carl Jung. To mature a man cannot just pretend to be a good boy. He cannot just suppress his dark urges. He must consciously face his shadow.
The shadow. The parts of ourselves we shove into the psychological basement because society, our parents, or our religion told us they were ugly or unacceptable.
Yes. Our repressed anger, our shame, our forbidden sexual desires, our capacity for cruelty. Jung argued that if a man does not consciously face and integrate his shadow, if he refuses to acknowledge that he is capable of darkness, that shadow controls him from the unconscious.
It leaks out, right?
It leaks out in passive aggression, addictions, or sudden outbursts.
Give me a real-world example of this. What does it look like when a guy doesn't integrate his shadow at the office?
If a man refuses to acknowledge his own healthy ambition or his capacity for ruthlessness, he will suppress it. He will play the nice guy.
Okay.
But because that energy is unintegrated, he will project it onto others. He will look at a mildly ambitious coworker and suddenly see them as an evil Machiavellian monster who is out to get him.
Oh, wow.
His enemy becomes the embodiment of his own unacknowledged darkness. This projection is the root of so much interpersonal and societal conflict. You fight the demon out there because you refuse to face the demon in here.
But it's not just the dark, scary stuff he has to face. To mature, he also has to face the feminine within himself.
Integrating the anima. This is perhaps Jung's most challenging concept for the modern man. Jung posited that because a man is born of a woman, every man has an inner feminine sub-personality within his own psyche.
It's his bridge, right?
It is his bridge to his emotions, to his vitality, to life, and to deep connection. If he rejects it because it seems unmanly, he psychologically dries up. He becomes a rigid, brittle machine.
The frameworks outline 4 distinct developmental stages of integrating this inner anima. Let's hear them because this is literally the roadmap to emotional maturity for a man.
Stage 1 is Eve, representing mother dependency. At this stage, the man views the feminine solely as a provider of biological and emotional needs. A woman exists to feed him, clean up after him, and soothe him.
Wow, okay.
Stage 2 is Helen of Troy, representing the collective sexual icon. Think of Marilyn Monroe or modern Instagram models. At this stage, the feminine is purely an object of physical desire and conquest. The Don Juan syndrome lives entirely in this stage.
A lot of guys get stuck right there. They spend their whole lives chasing the Helen stage.
Very true. And it destroys their marriages and leaves them empty in their later years. The transition to stage 3 is crucial.
What's stage 3?
Stage 3 is Mary, representing spiritual devotion. Here, a man finally learns to separate raw lust from love. He sees the feminine as something to be cherished and respected spiritually.
That's a huge shift.
Most importantly, he sees a woman as an independent, sovereign being, not just a tool for his physical or emotional satisfaction. And finally, the highest peak is stage 4, Sophia, representing ultimate wisdom.
Sophia.
Here, the anima becomes an integrated inner guide connecting the man's conscious ego directly to the deep, intuitive wisdom of the collective unconscious.
What happens if a man fails this integration? What does it feel like if he is possessed by a negative, unintegrated anima on a random Tuesday afternoon?
The symptoms are very specific. A man possessed by a negative anima loses all his spontaneity. He becomes incredibly petty, hypercritical of his partner, and driven by unpredictable dark moods.
He gets moody.
He often falls into a rigid pseudo-intellectualism to mask the fact that he is emotionally dead inside. He becomes a victim of his own erratic internal weather, lashing out at the world because he is at war with his own soul.
This is exactly why we love the hero's journey in movies. This is why we go to the theater. The protagonist literally has to go into the inmost cave, like Jonah being swallowed by the whale, or Luke Skywalker going into that dark tree cave on Dagobah.
Yes.
He has to face his own darkness, his shadow, and reconcile with the feminine before he has the power to save the world. It's not just a clever movie trope. It's a hardwired evolutionary blueprint for our own brains. We obsessively watch these movies because our souls are starving for the initiation we never got.
That is the perfect synthesis. The drama playing out on the screen is the sacred ritual our psyche desperately craves to catalyze its own maturation. We watch the hero die and be reborn because we need to do the exact same thing.
Which finally brings us to the mountaintop. If patriarchy is just boy psychology, what does true mature man psychology actually look like?
Moore outlines the solution. Initiation means ascending to the 4 mature archetypes. These are the integrated, healthy, powerful expressions of masculine energy.
Let's contrast them directly with the boy archetypes we discussed earlier. We had the high chair tyrant and the weakling. When a man does the inner work, what does that energy mature into?
It matures into the king. The true king archetype brings order, calmness, and blesses others. He is the centered axis of his realm, whether that realm is a family, a business, or a nation.
So he doesn't throw tantrums.
A mature king does not need to scream or make others small to feel big. His primary function is generative. He empowers others, he sees the latent potential in the young, and he creates a secure, flourishing domain where life thrives.
And the grandstander bully, the guy acting like he's storming the beach at a staff meeting.
That chaotic energy matures into the warrior. The true warrior does not fight to stroke his own ego, and he doesn't fight for the sadistic thrill of violence. He fights solely to protect what is sacred.
He has a purpose.
He sets incredibly firm boundaries. He serves a transcendent cause, a higher purpose beyond his own selfishness. He is disciplined, clear-headed, decisive, and crucially, he knows exactly when to use his sword and when to keep it sheathed.
The precocious manipulator, the guy twisting facts to sound smart.
Matures into the magician. The magician understands the deep, hidden, complex structures of the world, whether that's mastering a complex technology, understanding deep psychology, or knowing the laws of nature.
But he uses it differently.
Unlike the manipulator, the magician uses this profound knowledge to transform, to heal, and to guide others, never to deceive them. He is the mentor, the ritual elder, the master craftsman.
And finally, the mama's boy, or the disconnected dreamer.
Matures into the lover. This is the vital energy that connects a man deeply, viscerally to life. It is his capacity for overwhelming joy, for devastating grief, for deeply appreciating beauty, art, nature, and profound physical and emotional intimacy.
Wow.
It's crucial to understand without the lover, the king, warrior, and magician just become dry, cruel, emotionless machines. The lover is the blood in the veins. It keeps the man human, empathetic, and connected to the heartbeat of the world.
That is an incredibly beautiful, inspiring vision of masculinity. It is so far removed from the toxic stereotypes of the grunting, unfeeling macho man.
And Hakkarainen's synthesis brings us all back to a powerful unifying manifesto. The Finnish man, the Western man, and indeed every person listening to this must realize a fundamental truth.
Which is?
This inner king, this complete mature blueprint of the warrior, magician, and lover is not something you have to acquire. It's already inside you. The materials poetically call it the soul sunlight.
It's not something you have to buy on Amazon. You can't learn it from a men's lifestyle magazine. You don't earn it by getting a promotion from your boss.
Exactly. The text quotes a Huron indigenous chief speaking to a French baron centuries ago, and it encapsulates this radical sovereignty perfectly. The chief said, "I am the master of my body. I answer for myself. I do what I want. I am the first and the last of my nation, and I am subject only to the Great Spirit."
Subject only to the Great Spirit, not subject to the fluctuations of the economy, not subject to the expectations of a demanding partner, not subject to the political whims of a conqueror.
It is a profound call for radical internal sovereignty. Men must stop seeking validation from external society. They must stop waiting for the culture to give them permission to be men. They must build a relationship with their own inner depth. They must initiate themselves.
It's about taking off the mask of the good boy. You don't need a therapist to fix you. You don't need a priest to intercede for you, and you certainly don't need a magazine to tell you how to be a man.
No, you don't.
The blueprint for the king is already hardwired into your psychological DNA. It's just dormant, waiting in the Batcave. You just have to do the brave, terrifying work of facing your shadow, integrating your emotions, and finally giving the king his rightful throne.
It is the ultimate human journey, moving from the conquered, silent, resentful Batcave man to the sovereign, expressive, radiant inner king.
What an absolute epic journey we've been on today. We started in the murky, deceptive waters of modern society, looking at the tragedy of the silent, conquered man trapped in the cages of materialism and the exhausting defensive postures of boy psychology.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground.
We ventured down into the psychological underworld, facing the shadow and the anima through the lens of sacred storytelling, and we finally arrived at the triumphant realization of the mature, empowering inner king that resides in every single man.
It fundamentally reframes our understanding of both human history and the immediate reality of our own minds.
And to leave you with a final thought, building on these incredible sources, we talked a lot today about how historical conquerors used language hierarchy and religion to cage the tribal mind, turning free sovereign men into anxious, domesticated subjects. I want you to look at your life today. Look at the device you are probably using to listen to this right now.
That's a great point.
If the conquest is no longer happening with literal swords, foreign kings, or Latin-speaking priests demanding your obedience, is it happening right now through the algorithms? Through the endless notifications, the curated outrage machine, the digital dopamine loops sitting in your pocket? Are you truly the sovereign king of your digital mind, or have you willingly stepped into a brand new glowing cage designed by a new set of conquerors? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive, and keep exploring your inner world.